I'm Natalie Hayes. I'm 32. And the moment I finally understood what I meant to my boyfriend wasn't when he cheated. It was when he introduced me at his birthday dinner and smirked like he was doing me a favor, then said, loud enough for 16 people to hear, "Don't get any ideas, you're just temporary." They chuckled, not because it was funny, because laughing was easier than sitting in the discomfort. I stood up, paid my share, and said, "Guess the temporary part just ended." Then I walked out like my dignity wasn't negotiable. But if you're wondering why that line broke something in me so cleanly, it's because it wasn't the first time I'd felt like I was being weighed. I should have known something was wrong the first time I met his friends. 3 months in, Evan finally invited me into his core group. He didn't call them that directly, not in words. But you can tell when someone says my friends like it's a gated community and you're arriving without the right code. He texted me a location in Tribeca and said, "Dress nice. It's kind of a vibe." A vibe. That was the first clue, because normal people don't warn you that friendship requires a dress code. The bar was the kind of place where the lighting is dim on purpose, so everyone looks expensive and no one looks tired. There was bottle service, a hostess with a headset, a wall of glass that reflected the room back at itself like a magazine spread. I showed up in my best blazer, clean, fitted, off the rack from Nordstrom, because I'm not ashamed of buying clothes that don't come with a backstory and a stylist. I'd even polish my shoes, not because I thought they'd notice, because I wanted to feel like myself walking in. The table was already half full. Champagne was flowing like someone's parents owned the building. Everyone looked like they'd stepped out of a brand campaign. Effortless hair, watches that weren't trying to be subtle, that calm confidence people wear when they've never had to wonder if they belong in a room. Evan stood when he saw me, flashed that perfect smile, and kissed my cheek. Not my lips. It was small. It was nothing. But my body registered it anyway. "This is Natalie," he said, like he was presenting a resume instead of a person. "Guys, Nat, this is everyone. Everyone. No names, no warmth, no, I'm so happy you're here." Just a roll call of faces. A woman with glossy hair and a tight smile lifted her glass at me, like I was a new intern. Another guy nodded once and went right back to his phone. Then a man at the near end of the table leaned forward, elbows on the wood, like he'd been waiting for his turn. "So," he said, eyes sliding over me with polite precision, "what do you do, Natalie?" The question wasn't rude, but the way he asked it made my stomach tighten. Like this wasn't curiosity, this was categorization. "I'm an architect," I said with a pleasant smile, because that's what women learn early. Smile first, so you don't get labeled difficult. A few polite nods rippled around the table. "Nice," the man said, dragging the word out like he was being generous. "Which firm?" I told him. "Mid-sized, respected. Good work. The kind of place where your projects actually get built, not just photographed." He blinked, then gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Oh," one syllable. A full verdict. "I thought you meant one of the big ones," he added lightly, like he was just thinking out loud. And then, just like that, the conversation moved on, leaving me standing there with my drink and that faint heat creeping up my neck. I felt like I'd failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Evan didn't correct him, didn't jump in, didn't say, "She's talented. She's the real deal." He just laughed softly and put a hand on my lower back, guiding me into an empty seat like he'd successfully seated a guest at the right table. For the next hour, it was death by 1,000 tiny cuts. A woman asked where I grew up, then nodded like she was filing it away under acceptable but not impressive. A man asked what I drove, and when I said it, he chuckled like I'd told him a joke about myself. Someone made a comment about how ambition is sexy, and then looked past me directly at Evan like I wasn't in the circle. And the whole time, Evan was charming, warm, laughing, performing. Just not with me. He'd touch my shoulder occasionally, like a reminder that I existed, but he never pulled me into the conversation, never made space for me. I kept telling myself, it's fine, they're strangers, they'll warm up. But there's a specific kind of loneliness that hits when you're sitting beside the person you love and still feel like you're alone at the table. When we finally left, the sidewalk air felt too cold and too honest. The Uber smelled like someone else's cologne and mint gum. Evan slid in beside me and stared forward like the night had been normal. I watched the city blur through the window. My throat felt tight, not from sadness, from restraint. He stayed quiet until we were halfway home. Then he said casually, like he was offering feedback after a presentation, "You were kind of quiet tonight." I turned my head slowly, because I felt like I was being interviewed for a job I didn't apply for. He blinked. "What does that mean?" It means your friends spent the whole night trying to figure out if I was worth your time based on my resume. He exhaled like I was being dramatic. They're just protective. Protective of what? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Of your reputation? He shifted in his seat. They've seen me date people who... Who what? I cut in softly. Who didn't have the right credentials. He didn't answer right away. And that pause, that tiny silence, it told me everything he wasn't brave enough to say out loud. I stared at him. Do you care about any of that stuff? No, he said too quickly. Of course not. Then he reached for my hand, squeezing like it was supposed to erase the last 2 hours. I like you for you, he said, voice sweet, practiced. Not for any of that. I watched our hands linked together on the seat between us and felt something in me go very still. Good, I said, forcing a small smile, because that's all I've got to offer. He leaned in and kissed my cheek again. That's all I want, he murmured. But even then, 3 months in, I remember thinking something I didn't want to admit. If that's all he wants, why does it feel like he's hiding it? I didn't say it, I didn't fight, because I wanted to believe him. And maybe that's the saddest part, how hard I worked to stay soft for someone who was quietly sharpening the knife. Because the signs were already there. I just didn't want to see them. I wish I could tell you I left after that first night, that I took the Uber ride home as a warning siren, packed my self-respect into a suitcase, and never looked back. But love doesn't work like that. Love is quieter, slower. It convinces you to interpret disrespect as a phase, and coldness as stress, and silence as miscommunication. So I stayed. And for the next 4 months, Evan didn't do one big terrible thing. He did 100 small ones. Month 4, my firm won a small but prestigious design award. Not the kind the public cares about. No red carpet, no celebrity guest list. But in my world, it mattered. It meant my name had been said in rooms where people don't say names unless they mean it. I remember standing in the conference room when my director announced it. The fluorescent lights were harsh, the coffee was stale, and yet my hands shook anyway. Because I'd worked for it. Because it wasn't handed to me. That night, I went to Evan's apartment with the kind of excitement that makes you forget to be cool. He was in his kitchen, shirt sleeves rolled up, checking something on his phone. The place smelled like expensive soap and whatever candle he'd recently decided was his personality. Guess what? I said, barely able to hold it in. He looked up. What? We won, I said. The Hudson Award, my project. His eyebrows lifted. Oh, nice. Not, that's amazing. Not, I'm proud of you. Just nice, like I'd told him I found a parking spot. I laughed awkwardly, trying to patch the moment. It's actually kind of a big deal. He stepped forward, kissed my cheek, and gave me a quick squeeze. That's great, babe. Then his phone buzzed again, and his eyes dropped instantly to the screen. I watched his face change in that subtle way it always did when something important pulled him away. I waited. He didn't look back up. So I said it again, slower, like if I translated my joy into smaller words, he might hold it better. It's recognition that actually matters for me. He finally put his phone down, and the smile he gave me was polite, like he was a manager congratulating an employee. I'm happy for you, he said, seriously. Then he added, without thinking, you should post about it. I did, and I tagged him, because I wasn't ashamed. He didn't repost it. He didn't like it. He didn't even mention it. Later, I saw he posted an Instagram story that night. Dim lighting, cocktail glass, soft music. No people in the shot, just a caption. Celebrating good news. No tag, no name, no sign I existed. When I asked him the next day, lightly, like I was testing the water, hey, why didn't you tag me? He blinked at me like I'd asked for his bank password. I don't like mixing personal and professional online, he said. You post me sometimes, I pointed out. He shrugged. Not when it's career stuff. Something in my stomach sank. Because what he was really saying was, I don't want my world to see you as part of mine. I didn't accuse him of it. I just swallowed the feeling like I always did and told myself it was small. That's the thing about slow erasure. It happens so gradually you don't notice you're disappearing until you look up and realize you've been acting like a guest in your own relationship. Month 5, we ran into his ex-girlfriend Trish at a charity gala. It wasn't even a place I wanted to be. A large room full of polished people pretending to care about a cause while scanning the room for better conversations. I went because Evan asked me to. Because he said, it'll be fun. The way people say fun when they mean useful. I wore a simple black dress that made me feel elegant without trying too hard. When we arrived, he greeted people like he belonged there, like he'd been trained for it. I stayed half a step behind him, smiling, nodding, doing that polite girlfriend dance. Then I felt it. The shift. Like the air changed pressure. Evan froze mid-sentence and his posture straightened, shoulders back, chin slightly lifted. I followed his gaze. And there she was, Trish. Everything about her looked curated. Blonde hair, in perfect loose waves that somehow didn't move when she walked. A dress that hugged in expensive places. Earrings that caught the light like they were designed to be noticed from across a room. She smiled when she saw him. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "I remember what you wanted." "Evan," she said, voice smooth. Wow. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks, and it hit me like a slap. He was happy to see her. Not polite happy. Not awkward happy. Happy happy. He stepped forward and kissed her cheek. Too close. Too familiar. "Trish," he said, like the name still tasted good. Then he remembered me. A beat too late. "Natalie," he said, turning slightly. "This is Trish." Trish looked at me, eyes sliding over my face, my dress, my posture. Then she smiled wider, like she'd decided I wasn't dangerous. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. Evan didn't say, "my girlfriend." He didn't say, "the woman I'm with now." He just let the moment hang. Trish's hand touched his arm as she laughed at something he said. And he leaned in, smiling back, listening like every word mattered. I stood there, holding my drink, feeling like a third wheel in my own relationship. On the drive home, Evan was quiet. Not guilty quiet. Reflective quiet. Like he was replaying something. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said, staring out the window. But something had shifted. I could feel it in the space between us. Like a door that had been mostly closed had just cracked open. Month 6, my parents visited the city. This mattered to me. Not because they needed anyone's approval, but because I wanted Evan to meet them properly. I wanted to see him in my world. In the world that raised me. The world of practical love and small sacrifices. He agreed, but the entire time he moved like someone stuck at an event they couldn't leave. My dad talked about his years working at a machine shop. My mom talked about their first apartment in Queens, the one where they used to heat water on the stove because the building's hot water worked when it felt like it. Evan smiled politely, nodded, asked a few questions, but his eyes kept drifting. To his phone. To the room. Anywhere but here. When my mom laughed, he laughed a half second late. When my dad told a story about saving up for months to buy my first drafting set, Evan's smile tightened, like he didn't know what to do with the sincerity. After dinner, when my parents left, Evan exhaled like someone removed a weight. "They're sweet," he said. The way he said sweet made it sound like quaint. Like he was describing an antique shop he'd never visit again. I waited. He didn't add anything else. He didn't say, "I like them." He didn't say, "I get you more now." So I asked quietly, "Did you like them?" He blinked. "Yeah, of course." Then he kissed my forehead, like that was supposed to end the conversation. Month 7, he started mentioning Trish constantly. Not directly. Not like I miss her, but like she was suddenly the measuring stick for everything. "Trish took me to this place once. Best steak I've ever had." Trish knew the owner of that gallery. Trish used to handle things like this so easily. He'd say it casually, with a smile, like he didn't realize each mention was a needle. I told myself I wasn't insecure, and it wasn't insecurity. It was pattern recognition. Because I wasn't just hearing her name, I was hearing my absence. And the worst part? He never said her name like it was something he regretted. He said it like it was something he admired. I started noticing other things too. The way he'd correct my pronunciation of restaurants like he was helping me. The way he'd glance at my outfit before we went out, not to compliment, but to assess. The way he'd say, "You'll be fine," when I expressed discomfort around his friends. Not, "I'll be with you." Just, "You'll be fine." Like I was something he managed. Like I was someone he brought along, not someone he chose loudly. And still, I stayed, because he'd also do these small, tender things that made me doubt my own instincts. He'd bring me coffee without asking. He'd hold my hand crossing the street. He'd tell me I was beautiful when I was half asleep. Those moments were real, but they were inconsistent. And inconsistency is the most addictive kind of love. It keeps you waiting for the version of them you fell for. It keeps you hoping. 2 weeks before his birthday dinner, Evan announced he was doing something big. I assumed it would be intimate. Close friends, maybe his parents another night. But then he sent me the guest list. 16 people. Most I'd never met. And the restaurant reservation? A place where the menu didn't have prices. I stared at the screen, heat crawling up my chest. "This is like $300 a person," I said when I saw him that night. He didn't look up from his phone. "It's my birthday." "I'm not saying don't celebrate," I said carefully. "I'm saying maybe somewhere more reasonable." He finally looked at me, expression sharpening. "I only turned 32 once," he said, "and everyone pays for themselves anyway." I blinked. "You realize that doesn't make it less performative, right?" His eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I hesitated because I could already feel the ice forming. It means you want to impress people instead of just being. His face went cold so fast it was almost impressive. Not everyone is satisfied with just being, Natalie, he said. Some of us have standards. That word hit like a slap. Standards. As if my discomfort was a sign of low worth. As if simplicity was the same as failure. I stared at him, heart thudding. He didn't apologize. He didn't soften it. He just went back to his phone like he'd said something obvious. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just letting his friends judge me. He agreed with them. He just didn't want to admit it out loud. Not yet. But he would. Soon. Because the people who are embarrassed by you don't stay quiet forever. They eventually need an audience. After that fight, if you can even call it a fight, something settled between us. Not resolution. Wait. Evan didn't apologize. I didn't push. We moved through the days like two people carefully stepping around a crack in the floor, pretending it wasn't widening under our feet. But the birthday dinner loomed. Every conversation bent toward it eventually. Reservations, outfits, who was coming, who might come. And the closer it got, the more I felt like I was preparing for an exam I hadn't studied for. Because this wasn't just his birthday. It was a performance. And I was already worried I'd forgotten my lines. The week after our argument, I started working on his gift. Not because I felt obligated, because that's who I am when I care. I didn't want to buy him something expensive just to keep up with his friends' Tiffany boxes and Cartier ribbons. That kind of gift would have felt like a lie. So I made him something instead. A custom architectural drawing. Not of some flashy skyline or iconic landmark, but of the building where we first met. A small, understated gallery on the Lower East Side, the one with uneven floors and track lighting that never quite worked right. The place where we talked for 3 hours straight. Where he'd told me I was the most interesting person he'd met in years. Where I'd believed him. I worked on it late at night after work. Sleeves rolled up, music low. Every line was deliberate. The curve of the doorway. The way the windows caught light at dusk. The tiny imperfections that made the building real. It wasn't grand, but it was honest. And somewhere deep down, I think I hoped it would remind him of who we were before the measuring started. I showed it to my sister Lena one afternoon. She traced the frame with her finger, slow and quiet. "This is beautiful," she said. "He'd better appreciate this." "He will," I replied automatically. Lena didn't smile. She just looked at me for a long moment, long enough that I felt exposed. "Natalie," she said gently, "can I ask you something?" I sighed. "If you're about to tell me I'm overthinking—" "I'm not," she interrupted. "I'm asking something real." I waited. "Are you happy?" The question hit harder than any insult Evan's friends had thrown at me. Because it wasn't accusatory. It wasn't dramatic. It was calm, concerned, honest. "What kind of question is that?" I said, forcing a small laugh. "Of course I am." Lena tilted her head. That wasn't an answer. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. From the outside, she continued carefully. "It looks like you're working really hard to make someone happy who doesn't seem to work very hard to make you feel secure. You don't know him like I do," I said quickly. "Maybe," she replied. "Or maybe I see him clearer because I'm not in love with him." I hated that she might be right. So I did what I always did when the truth got too close. I changed the subject. But the question stayed. It followed me through the next few days. Through work meetings. Through late-night silence. Through the way Evan barely asked how my day was anymore. Just whether I was good with the dinner plans. The night before his birthday, he mentioned casually that his ex, Trish, might stop by. "Just for a drink," he said, like it was nothing. "She knows a lot of people coming." My chest tightened. "You invited her?" He shrugged. "It's not a big deal." I looked at him, really looked at him, at how little my reaction seemed to matter. And for the first time, I felt a strange calm settle in. Not peace. Preparation. Because when someone keeps telling you, in small ways, that you're replaceable, eventually you start listening. The night of the dinner arrived faster than I expected. I stood in my apartment, staring at myself in the mirror. Simple dress, clean lines, no logos, no performance. I looked like myself. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't try to change that. I wrapped the framed drawing carefully, smoothing the paper, tying the ribbon neatly. Not to compete, but to honor the version of me who still believed in meaning. As I locked the door behind me, I had the strangest thought. No matter what happens tonight, I'm not walking out smaller. I just didn't know yet how true that would be. The restaurant was exactly the kind of place Evan liked. Floor-to-ceiling windows, gold-toned lighting, ocean murals meant to feel exclusive without trying too hard. A room designed to make people feel important, if they belonged there. I arrived on time. Not early, not late. on time in a way that said I wasn't begging to be included. The host checked the reservation, glanced at me, then back at the screen, just long enough for me to notice the pause. He smiled politely and led me toward a long table already glowing with candlelight and champagne. Everyone was already there. Evan wasn't. That should have told me something. Conversations dipped as I approached. Not enough to stop, just enough to acknowledge a disruption. Someone nodded. Someone lifted a glass. No one stood. I felt like I'd walked into the middle of a scene already in progress. Evan arrived moments later, sliding into his seat at the head of the table like he'd been there all along. He leaned in, kissed my cheek, not my lips, and smiled. "You made it," he said, like there had ever been a question. He took the wrapped gift from my hands without looking at it. "You can put that on the gift table," he said, already turning away. I hadn't noticed the gift table at first. It sat near the wall, stacked with designer shopping bags, white boxes tied with familiar blue ribbons, gold logos that didn't need names. My wrapped frame looked small when I placed it there. Quiet. Human. When I returned to the table, I finally saw the seating clearly. Evan at the head, his closest friends flanking him, and me near the far end. Between Greg, someone's husband I barely knew, and an empty chair. The empty chair sat beside Evan. Reserved. The message wasn't subtle. I hadn't been seated beside him. I'd been placed where I'd caused the least friction. The first half hour passed in polite fragments. Greg turned to me once. "So, architect, that's cool. Like, houses?" "Mostly commercial," I said. "Some cultural work." "Oh, cool, cool." He turned away before I finished the sentence. Across the table, conversations overlapped. Vacation homes, cars, private schools. Evan laughed easily, chiming in, relaxed. He didn't look at me. Someone asked how long we'd been together. Evan answered without turning. "About 8 months. 8 months of trying to belong to a room that had already decided I didn't." Then the empty chair filled. Trish arrived. Evan stood immediately, smile widening, body opening. He hugged her, too long, too familiar. "You made it," he said, warmth flooding his voice. She slid into the seat beside him like it had always been hers. I watched them talk. Her hand brushed his arm. His body angled toward her, the ease between them effortless. He hadn't looked at me in over an hour. Dessert arrived. Candles were lit. Glasses refilled. Then Brittany stood and tapped her glass. Okay, speech time." Groans. Laughter. "I just want to say happy birthday to Evan," she said brightly, "to someone who's driven, successful, and has worked incredibly hard to build the life he has." Evan lifted his glass, soaking it in. "And honestly," she added, glancing around the table, "someone like him could have his pick of just about anyone in this city." A few people laughed. "But tonight," Brittany continued lightly, "he did bring a date. So Evan, why don't you introduce your girlfriend properly?" The room shifted. Evan stood, slightly unsteady, champagne in hand. He looked at me and smirked. In that moment, I understood something with perfect clarity. This wasn't going to be an accident. This was the moment he'd been building toward. Evan stood. The room didn't go silent, but it quieted enough for attention to sharpen. He lifted his glass, swaying just slightly, not drunk enough to lose control, just drunk enough to feel bold. "This is Natalie," he said, gesturing vaguely in my direction. A few people waved, someone smiled politely, someone else took a sip. He paused, lips curling. "My girlfriend." Air quotes. A ripple of laughter moved down the table, light, social, easy. I didn't move. "But seriously," Evan continued, eyes settling on me now, that familiar smirk returning. "Don't get any ideas." The laughter thinned. "You're just temporary." The table didn't fall silent. It went uncomfortable. Someone cleared their throat. Someone shifted in their chair. Madison started to speak. "Evan?" "What?" he cut in, smiling. "I'm being honest. That's healthy, right? Communication?" He glanced toward Trish, who was already smirking. "I mean, look around," he continued, gesturing at the table, the candles, the room. This is my world." A few nervous laughs followed. "She's sweet," he said lightly. "She's fine, but she's not exactly endgame." The word landed heavy. Brittany tried to laugh it off. "Oh my God, Evan, you're terrible." He waved her off. No, listen, she's like..." He searched for the metaphor. "You know when you eat sorbet between courses?" A couple of people laughed despite themselves. "That's Natalie," he said, pleased with himself. "She's the palate cleanser between the real meals." Trish laughed openly. "What did you call it again?" someone asked. "A bridge girlfriend," Evan said. "She's the bridge from Trish to whoever's next." The laughter this time was thinner, forced. It sounds mean, he added casually, but it's not mean if it's true, right? He looked directly at me, waiting, expecting me to smile, to make it easier for everyone else. Is that really what you think I am? I asked. My voice was quiet. Too quiet. Oh, don't be sensitive, he said. You knew what this was. No, I replied. I really didn't. He scoffed. Come on. Did you actually think we were going to get married? The word married hung in the air. You're an architect who drives a Honda, he said casually, and He gestured at himself, at the table, at the room. This was fun, but let's be realistic. Dead silence. No one laughed this time. Trish smirked. Someone stared at their plate. I'm just being honest for once, Evan continued, irritation creeping into his voice. Everyone else is too polite to say it, but we're all thinking it. A fork hit a plate. Stop, someone said quietly. Evan ignored them. She's a grown woman, he said dismissively. She can handle the truth. He looked at me again. Right, Natalie, you can handle it. I stood, slowly, calmly. Every eye at the table turned toward me. I reached into my bag and pulled out my wallet. I counted exact cash. My meal, my drinks, a generous tip. I placed it neatly on the table in front of my plate. You're right about one thing, I said. Evan frowned. What's that? I can handle the truth. Natalie, sit down, he snapped. You're making a scene. You called me a palate cleanser in front of 16 people, I replied evenly. The scene was already made. His smile faltered. I was joking, he said quickly. God, can't you take a joke? Were you joking when you said I wasn't endgame? Or when you said I was temporary? Or when you asked this table if anyone actually thought we'd get married? He opened his mouth, closed it. I looked around the table. Did that sound like a joke to any of you? No one answered. Someone shook their head. I turned back to Evan. Here's the thing, I said. You're absolutely right. I'm not your endgame. Relief flickered across his face until I finished. Because you don't get to decide my endgame anymore. Natalie, wait, he said, standing now, panic replacing confidence. I spent 8 months trying to be good enough for someone who just announced to a room full of people that I never was, I continued. You didn't say it before. You just finally said it out loud. That's not what I meant. Yes, I said softly, it is. I walked to the gift table and picked up my wrapped frame. I made you something, I said. Spent weeks on it. His eyes widened. Natalie, please. But you don't deserve it. I met his gaze one last time. Guess the temporary part just ended. I turned to the table. Enjoy your dinner. I didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I just walked out. I didn't rush. I didn't cry in the hallway. I didn't slam the door. I walked out the way you do when you finally understand something so clearly that emotion would only slow you down. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. My reflection stared back at me in the mirrored wall, calm, composed, almost unfamiliar. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. When the doors opened to the parking garage, the noise of the restaurant vanished behind me like it had never existed. I sat in my car without starting it, both hands resting on the steering wheel. I breathed. In, out. I wasn't angry. That came later. Right then I was empty in a clean way, like something rotten had finally been cut out. I drove across town to Marcus's place. My best friend took one look at my face and didn't ask questions at first. He stepped aside, let me in, handed me a glass of water like he'd been preparing for this moment his whole life. I sat on the edge of his couch and told him everything. Not emotionally, not dramatically, word for word. When I finished, he stared at the floor for a long moment. Jesus Christ, he finally said. Yeah. So, he asked carefully, what are you going to do? Nothing yet, I said. I left, that's it. He leaned back, processing. He's going to call. I know. Are you going to answer? I shook my head. No. Marcus studied me. Not even to hear him out? I looked at him. He called me a palate cleanser in front of his ex-girlfriend, in front of 16 people. What exactly am I supposed to hear? He didn't argue. An apology? He offered quietly. An apology for what? I asked. For saying what he actually thinks? That landed. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, fair. You know what the worst part is? I added. This wasn't the first time. It was just the first time he said it out loud. Marcus exhaled. You okay? I thought about it. About the weight I'd been carrying for months without realizing it. You know what? I said. Yeah, I actually am. That's when my phone started vibrating. Evan. I watched it ring. It stopped. Then rang again. I didn't touch it. At 10:52 p.m., he left a voicemail. I didn't listen to the whole thing. I heard enough. Natalie, hi, it's me. Look, I was drinking. I said some things that came out wrong. It was supposed to be funny. Everyone was laughing. I was just playing to the crowd. I deleted it before he finished. At 11:47, he called again. This time he sounded panicked. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean you were temporary. I don't even know what I meant. I was drunk and stupid and trying to impress people who don't matter. You matter. You've always mattered. Please, just call me back. I can fix this. Then the text started. Are you awake? I know you're seeing these. Please don't do this. We need to talk like adults. All delivered. None read. I turned my phone face down on Marcus's coffee table. I'm going to sleep, I said. Thanks for letting me crash. Stay as long as you want, he replied. I slept better that night than I had in months. No anxiety dreams. No tight chest. No rehearsed arguments playing on repeat. When I woke up, my phone had 23 messages from Evan. 6 missed calls. I didn't open a single one. Marcus made coffee while I sat at the counter, quiet but steady. What's the plan? He asked. Go to my place, I said. Get some clothes. Stay here a few days if that's okay. Of course it is. But he might show up there, Marcus added. I know, I said. I'll go when he's not around. By Sunday afternoon, Evan's tone had changed. The apologies thinned. The frustration crept in. You're really going to ignore me over a joke? This is childish. We need to talk. That night, my sister Lena called. Did Evan just call you? I asked. Yes, she said flatly. What did you say? I told him to lose my number. I closed my eyes. Thank you. He tried to explain, she continued. Said it was a misunderstanding. Said he